Hi everyone, Kate here, and this week I'm going to be talking about Cake Mascara. I'm going to be discussing both how it was made historically, as well as sharing with you my own historically inspired Cake Mascara recipe. It's been a long time coming. been quite a journey. I actually started playing around with Cake Mascara Formulations back in about June of 2020. Yeah, it's been a while. I tried several different recipes, I tried different variations, I tried tinkering with recipes, and recipe after recipe, they weren't turning out. They were either too firm, they were too soft, they were too prone to smearing. You certainly don't want a mascara that when you put it on your lashes, most of it migrates down to your face. It's not a good look. Panda eyes was not the goal. After many months of trial and error, I just got so frustrated, I had to take a step back. I had run out of both patience and little metal pots. It'd been over a year since my last attempt, so recently I decided to give it another go, and I actually managed to do it this time. I managed to come up with a working cake mascara recipe. Sorry. A little overexcited. Honestly, it was so much more difficult to get to this point than I was expecting. Mascara in general is a hard thing to formulate from scratch. With mascara, if it is not perfect, it does not work. But I was not about to let cake mascara be the thing that broke me. It was gonna happen. It's happened. I figured it out. We can now all move on. But before moving on to my recipe, let's have a look at some historical mascara formulations. Because we all know I love a historical formulation. Love them. Now, mascara, or perhaps more accurately lash darkeners, have been around since ancient times. Traditionally, kohl, which is a mineral-based pigment, was used as a mascara, as well as just sort of a general eyeshadow eyeliner type of product. It is still used in some parts of the world today, especially around sort of North Africa, South Asia, Middle East, but there are some concerns about possible lead contamination because it can be made from a variety of different mineral pigments. In the US, and I suspect in Canada too, where I am, if something's called kohl, it's usually referring to the color and not the product itself, because it's been banned by the, I think it's the FDA that's in charge of that. Okay, moving forward from ancient times to the 1800s. While you don't see many recipes for lash darkeners in old Victorian pharmaceutical books and beauty books, they do crop up occasionally. They're typically made with lamp black or from burning some sort of resin. One example of such a recipe, published in the Ugly Girl Papers from 1874, reads as follows. They may be darkened for theatricals by taking the black of frankincense, resin, and mastic burned together. This will not come off with perspiration. Another popular suggestion, as illustrated here in Personal Beauty, published in 1870, was to use a black ink, usually specifically Indian ink, to darken the lashes. Both of these methods are mostly aimed at darkening the lashes, rather than also lengthening and thickening the lashes like a modern product would do. You do see other advice, however, in these old books, aimed at growing naturally bountiful lashes. Usually what was suggested was either some sort of moisturizing product, or another very common suggestion was to trim your eyelashes. I personally cannot recommend getting scissors that close to your eyeballs. That sounds very dangerous. I think the idea behind that is you trim your split ends, so you should trim your eyelashes to do the same thing. Not recommended. I also probably wouldn't recommend mercury to regrow falling eyelashes. That sounds like a bad idea on a whole number of levels. Anyways, moving on. As time progressed into the 20th century, you started to see more sophisticated mascara recipes develop, as makeup in general became more socially acceptable. By the 1910s, mascara as we know it today was starting to gain traction. This mascara was made using a mix of pigment for darkening, waxes for thickening and lengthening the lashes, as well as water and some sort of emulsifier to allow for easy application. Mascara formulations could contain more or less water, depending on the type that you were trying to make. Cream mascaras have more water in the formulation, making them easier to spread on the lashes, whereas cake mascaras have less water and are intended to have water added during application. You do also see liquid mascaras. We're not going to really be talking too much about liquid mascara today, but they were typically a gum-based, sometimes a gelatin-based, thick, sticky liquid, basically. I haven't had enough personal experience with these recipes, but that might be an experiment for the future. We'll see about that. Bacteria and microbes love water, so the less water in a formulation, the less chance of those pesky little guys contaminating and spoiling the product. For this reason, cake mascara is more shelf stable, as well as having a longer shelf life, which I'm sure was a pretty big draw, not just for consumers, but for the manufacturers and the retailers. They could keep the products on the shelf a lot longer. They didn't have to throw out as many old mascaras because they kept longer, especially in the days before really good eye-safe preservatives. There were preservatives back then. They were, some of them were a little iffy. Other than the water content, a lot of cream and cake mascara recipes were pretty similar. There really wasn't that much difference in terms of the ingredients they contained. As an example, here's a 1919 cream mascara recipe. As you can see, we have the waxes, beeswax and carnauba wax, the pigment, here left to the manufacturer, as well as the water and emulsifiers. Now, I'm not a chemist, but I suspect the stearic acid and the Trisopropylamine combine in a way similar to tea, which we're going to talk about in a minute, that's an acronym, creating a soap-like base for the mascara. Now, we don't commonly think of soap as an emulsifier, but that's what it is. It helps to mix oils and water together, which is why soap can remove grease and allow it to be easily rinsed away with water. That is emulsification. Some early mascaras did just use regular soap in their formulation. But as anyone who has ever gotten suds in their eyes will know, soap can be rather irritating to the delicate eye tissue. So manufacturers had to come up with a solution to this. The solution was Man, chemical names when you have a slight speech impediment are difficult. Trithanolamine. The solution was trithanolamine. Now, originally, as suggested by my Patreons, I thought I was going to do 2 different cake mascara recipes. One a historical recipe, as well as one created by myself, sort of using more modern ingredients. One ingredient that was very common in 1930s mascara formulations was trithanolamine. Oh, I got it that time. There we go. I hope. I wonder if it's tree like brie. Trithanolamine. Anyway, trithanolamine, which I will now be calling T, which is the short form that I can actually pronounce. It combines with stearic acid to form a pH-balanced, much less irritating soap. This actually worked so well that it is still used in many modern mascara formulations, not just specifically cake mascara, but mascara in general. Now, while it's certainly not the worst ingredient in the world, there are a few safety concerns with tea. It is approved for use in cosmetics, with restrictions on how much can be in the formula, and as I mentioned, it's used in many modern products. But it does rate about a 5 on the EWG scale, with concerns surrounding possible contamination, as well as some other issues. I did manage to source one from Voyager Soap and Candle, which is supposed to be free from contaminants, and was the best one on the market that I could find available to home crafters. Another thing to note with cake mascara is because you're combining the tea with stearic acid, you're actually forming tea stearate, which has a much higher safety rating. It's about 1 to 3 on EWG depending on usage rates. It's sort of like when you're making soap and you mix lye and oils together and saponification happens. You end up with soap and there isn't really any lye in the final product. You added it in, but because of the chemical reaction, you are left with something entirely different. When looking at recipes published in 1930s issues of The Chemist and Druggist, many of them used a higher proportion of tea than is nowadays considered safe. And if there is one thing I have learned in all my years of making historical beauty products, is that modern safety guidelines are important. If you ignore them, you may end up burning your forehead with a 1920s headache cologne. Okay, it wasn't like a serious burn, but like it was unpleasant enough that I am a little more cautious now. Lesson learned. So with that in the back of my mind, I opted to try some of the more water-heavy formulas that had a lower concentration of tea. They were within modern safety limits. And I hated all of them. The final product was actually very similar to some just like regular off-the-shelf modern mascaras, not cake mascaras, just like mascara in general. It was fairly soft. It actually had more of a normal mascara texture than I was expecting. And unfortunately, it smeared terribly. Like massive panda eyes every time I wore it. It just would not stay on my lashes. Also, as I half expected due to my previous experience with store-bought mascaras, I think the tea irritated my chemical sensitivities. I tried everything else in the formula before and never had a problem. But I think it was the tea. I had feared that might be a problem. I have some health issues and sometimes chemicals bother me in a way that they don't bother like normal people. And unfortunately, it looks like tea is one of those. The experiment wasn't for nothing, though, and the subsequent experiments that I made. I learned that historical mascara is pretty much like modern mascara. If you don't care about making your own and you just want a historical look, you can just buy a modern store-bought mascara, and it will have been similar to some historical formulation. Assuming you're not buying anything, I don't know, like weird. Like if you're just buying a normal mascara, normal black mascara or brown mascara, it's going to be the same look. It's going to be indistinguishable from the historical equivalent. So, however, if your goal is to make your own mascara, you just like making your own products like I do, or you want to know exactly what's in your products, or I don't know, it probably works out to be cheaper eventually. You got to invest in the ingredients to start with, but once you have them, it's probably more economical to make your own. If any of that is what you're interested in, I got you covered. Now, as I mentioned, I did have a bad feeling, even before I started, that with my chemical sensitivities, tea might not be the ingredient for me. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any direct substitutions for tea. There are some, but they're just not available to the home crafter, which is why my formula uses an entirely different method. Enter emulsifying wax. Emulsifying wax is a modern product that can be used to bind a little bit of oil or wax to a lot of water, which is why it's commonly used in things such as hair conditioners and lotions. Now, one thing to consider with emulsifying wax is that it's just a broad general term. It's not a specific thing. Different manufacturers are going to have different formulations. Now, okay, so I saw no point in reinventing the wheel. If somebody else has already done the work for me, I'm going to go with that. In the book Make It Up, this is by Marie Rama of Humblebee and Me. If you're in the DIY beauty sphere, I'm sure you've probably heard of her. She published this book a few years ago, and in this book, she does have just a normal mascara recipe. It's not a cake mascara, it's not a historical mascara, just a regular old cake mascara. I mean, mascara. I guess you just call it mascara. Anyway, she tried a variety of different emulsifying waxes, testing for irritation and how they performed in mascara. So based on her suggestions, I went with BTMS 50 for my particular recipe. She also recommends Polawax or Emulsifying Wax NF, and while I haven't experimented with them in my particular formula, I don't see why they wouldn't work. If anybody tries them, please let me know down in the comments and let me know how it turned out. If there's any problems, I'll pin a comment to let you know. But BTMS 50, Emulsifying Wax NF, and Polawax should all be perfectly suitable options for this recipe. Okay, so going back to our original formula, since emulsifying wax is our emulsifier, we can also eliminate the stearic acid. The stearic acid was there to work in tandem with the tea, triethylphana, whatever it was. And if it's not there anymore, we don't need the stearic acid. That leaves water, beeswax, spermaceti, and pigment. The water and the beeswax can stay. They're fine. There's no problem with those. The spermaceti I've replaced with a jojoba oil, which is what I typically do in my recipes. Obviously, we don't want to be using whale-based products anymore, and jojoba oil makes an excellent substitute. For pigment, I tried both carbon black, which is a commonly used historical pigment, as well as black iron oxide, which is a more readily available pigment option. I couldn't really tell any significant difference between the two. Use whichever you prefer. I like a mixture of the two, actually, but it all kind of looks the same. The only other change I'm making is the addition of a broad-spectrum preservative. This is a product that has water in it and is going to have water, probably just tap water, added to it. It's also being applied around the eyes. There just isn't a safe way of making mascara without adding a preservative. Not adding a preservative is just downright dangerous. You don't want to get an eye infection or worse. You only have one set of eyes. Please protect them. Speaking of infections, it's also a good idea to sterilize all your equipment before you begin, your little stirrers and your little pots. Typically, this is either done with boiling water, high-proof alcohol, a bleach solution. Use whatever method you prefer. We're trying to make this as safe as possible. Okay, so at long last, with all that preamble out of the way, and the many, many experiments and literally years of working on this recipe, here at long last is my historically inspired cake mascara recipe. Enjoy! For this recipe, you will need 2 grams of beeswax, 1 gram of a non-irritating emulsifying wax. I use BTMS 50 as I mentioned previously. 1 gram of jojoba oil. 6 grams of water. 2 grams of pigment. And lastly, 0.12 grams of a broad spectrum preservative. I'm using Optifin Plus. To begin, mix all the ingredients together except the preservative. Gently melt it all together over a low heat. As the wax melts, the mixture will begin to emulsify into a thick black goo. Keep stirring until it is a perfectly smooth, thick black goo, and then remove from the heat. Let cool for just a moment and then add in your preservative. We're doing this now as Optifin Plus shouldn't be heated above about 80 degrees Celsius, and by adding it after the melting process, we can ensure it's still going to be effective. And I added too much preservative, because that's just how this project goes. I tried to suck some of it back up, but that just wasn't gonna work. So, after remaking the mascara up to this point, let's add in the proper amount of preservative. You may need to put the mascara back on the heat just long enough for everything to come together into a smooth consistency again, but do be careful not to overheat it. Scoop into a container and let cool overnight. So I've actually been wearing it this entire video, and you will have seen it in my 1930s eye makeup video I did a little while ago, but let's have a look at how it applies. My Beauty's Question and Answer Dictionary from 1931 gives the following advice on how to apply a cake mascara. Moisten the brush with water before rubbing it on the cake of mascara. Now, rub the brush crosswise over the lashes. This will serve to separate them. Then brush the lashes upward, giving them the desired curve. One last thing to note with cake mascara is that there can be a bit of a learning curve. It's a bit messier to apply than cream mascaras, but on the flip side of that, you also have more control. You can make it thicker or thinner depending on how much water you add to the cake. You can also use it in a variety of different ways, such as a liquid eyeliner by using a brush in water instead of a mascara wand in water. Just be aware, sometimes if you add too much water to the cake, it can take a little longer to dry, so you want to be careful fluttering around those lashes until you're sure that it is actually dry. If you do accidentally smear a little bit, I find that a water-dampened cotton swab is excellent for removing mascara marks without disturbing the rest of the makeup too much. Well, that's it for this week. I'm going to celebrate after filming this by going to the shelf. I've been looking at this pile of failed mascaras sitting on my shelf for literally like nearly 2 years now. And to celebrate after this video, I'm going to go to that pile and I'm going to throw them all in the garbage. Just throw them out. We're done. We're done. We're moving on. Moving on. As always, thank you for watching and I will see you guys next time. Bye. This video is made possible through the generous support of my Patreon members. Thank you. As I have had problems with just like normal mascara in the past, right off the bat, right? That's not the same. What is the idiom? Right off the bat? Yeah, it's gotta be. It's not right off the batch. That sounds wrong. Maybe we'll just cut that line. Over a cream mat. Hi, Eggs. Can I shut that door? I'm just shutting the door for the noise. Oh, sleepy baby. You don't need mascara, do you? No, you're just naturally beautiful. No mascara for kitties. Yeah. Okay, you can go back to sleep now. Same kind of thing. That's what we're doing. We're making soap. We're saponifying. Saponifying. I like that word. Saponification. Saponification. I also like making soap. Making soap is fun. Which I'm probably never going to do a video on because I'm a stressed out soap maker. I love it, but I get like, I don't think I could do that in film at the same time. I hope this doesn't make me look too much like a linebacker on camera. It looks cute in person, but like you can see, it kind of I usually wear it with a belt at the waist and it kind of comes in. Whereas I feel like on camera, you just see the really wide shoulders and like nothing below. So I just look like, it's supposed to be 1930s inspired, but I don't know if I quite hit the mark here. Nobody's going to look at your eyelashes and be like, that's not historically accurate. Unless you're doing like, I don't know, glitter mascara. Is that a thing? I don't know if that's a thing. That sounds like it should be a thing. Okay, here we go. We're good. Oh. Yeah, if you're wondering what the heck it is on the back of here, I was trying to reuse paper. I have all these old worksheets from when I was a tutor, and I'm not doing that anymore. And I thought, well, what's the sense in throwing out a perfectly good sheet of paper? So I printed my scripts on the back. and we are done. It's fine. It's fine. We just got overexcited and we spilled our water all over the floor. It's okay. It's okay. Okay, we're fine. I better stop here.